Hello, my name is Andrew Hall and I am a wood turning teacher and demonstrator from Weardale in County Durham. Today what I'm going to do is turn two gifts. They're both going to be the same gift, but they're both for special friends that we have. One is a very good friend of mine who has just become a grandad, and the other one is a very good friend of Janet's who's actually just become a grandma. So I'm going to make these two little presents from some very special wood. In 2009, I collected some oak from Durham Cathedral, and I actually taught the canon of Durham Cathedral. And he invited us down to pick up some oak that had been taken from the west wing bell tower of the cathedral and been replaced with steel girders. The oak actually came out in 1989, and I collected it in 2009. So there was a long time between its being replaced and me picking it up, and it just laid under a tarpaulin for a long time. So if I show you a piece of it, this is a piece of the beam that we had, and you can see it's a really old, gnarly piece of oak. In fact, there, at that point there, that's an old nail. So again, I had to use metal detectors on it and everything. But once cut, the oak itself was absolutely beautiful. And there is a piece of the oak. I'm going to show you from the overhead camera because it really is gorgeous. There you can see the piece of oak, the medullary rays on there. Now I believe it was probably French oak because during the 12th century, the British were making all of the ships from English oak, and the cathedrals were all built from French oak. So I believe, according to the canon, because it was a Norman cathedral. So that's the beautiful oak, and I've got a piece in between the centres now. And what I did, I cut a square section off there, and then I found the centre of the material. I finger gauged it. I put a Rattle hole in each side there, and mounted it between centres with a step centre and a ring centre. So now I've got my safety glasses on. I'm going to turn the material, but I always consider safety before I start. First of all, I'll rotate the material by hand, make sure it's not catching. Secondly, I'll check the tool rest is actually as close to the material as possible, but no farther away than 6mm or quarter of an inch. And thirdly, I'll check that the height of the rest is 6mm, quarter of an inch below the center of the quill. This is the quill. And in the center of the quill, there's a groove. So you can put your ruler on there, hold the ruler horizontal, and there you can see that the gap between the bottom of the ruler and the actual tool rest itself is 6mm, quarter of an inch, lower than the center of the quill. Now I'm going to be working with what I call the Magnificent 7 tools. And primarily I'm working with the spindle set. And with the spindle set, what I'll do is I'll use the spindle roughing gouge. This is the 1.25" spindle roughing gouge, and it's ground on a dry grinder. However, if you prefer to use a wet grinder, the Record Power WS 250 is a great tool. This is the 3/8 10mm spindle gouge, which I'll be using to form the beads, the coves, and the V-cuts with a swept back grind. And I'll also be using the 3mm 1/8 parting tool. To complement these three tools, I've got 4 ball turning tools. And sometimes I use the ball gouges to take a piece of material from square it around, and I would use the 3/8 ball gouge with the swept back grind. And also, if I needed to create a spigot on that material to put it into the jaws of the chuck, then I would use a 3/8 10mm square skew beading parting tool. And that, along with a traditional ball gouge and a scraper with a negative grind on, that would make up my Magnificent 7. Those 7 tools will do virtually anything that you want to do in the workshop. Now, because this is a special project, I'm going to have a couple of specialist tools. And one is a bead forming tool, because we're going to put some captive rings into the project. And the other one is what I call a cat's claw, or a captive ring tool, to create the captive rings. So using the spindle roughing gouge, I will first of all set the material rotating at about 2000 revs, and then I will move from left to right with the spindle roughing gouge, going from high to low, so I'm turning it from square to round. Then I'm going to go from right to left, again going from high to low and turning from square to round. And from the scenes that you can see now, I can travel from either side. And the reason I can travel from either side is because I've taken all of the corners off the square material. So it means that we don't run the risk of splitting the corners off and shearing the timber across. So now I'm using the spindle roughing gouge with the bevel contacts so that the bevel is giving a smoother finish, and I'm just turning from left to right and rocking between angles. I call it dancing with the wood. And what I'll do now is do a planing finish. So I'm going to move the tool rest in again to within 6mm, rotate the material by hand, and then what I'll do is I'll actually elevate the tool, and I've got the tool running at 45 degrees to the tool rest with full bevel contact, and that will give me the best finish that I can possibly get from the spindle roughing gouge. Here's another view from the side just to show that the tool's locked into my side, and I'm actually just gliding from one angle to the other. And it's a planing cut. It's the same principle as using a smoothing plane or a jointing plane if you're smoothing down with the grain on the edge of a door, for example. Because what we're doing is we're actually turning between centres, and between centres what we've got is a parallel grain. If it was a group of straws, for example, the straws are between each centre, so we're planing the material off. I'll put some measurements onto the material now, and again, it's a good thing to do when you first start turning, to try and work to measurements so that you have some, and do multiples if you can. So I'm just going to put a pencil line on each end, and then I'll put some measurements on there, and I'll measure about 1/3 of the way across for the handle, and then I'm going to divide it into 3, and the 3 pencil marks that I've just put onto the material there are to produce the captive rings. Using the 3mm parting tool, I am now just taking the material to just a couple of millimeters larger than the drive centres. That's the stab centre with the 16 prong drives in, and the ring centre, the standard centre that comes with the lathe when you buy them new. So now using the bead forming tool, and again it looks as if the tool's been used upside down, but in actual fact it's the correct way to use it. If you were to use it the opposite way, you would break the grain out and scrape the grain. This is a cutting form, and what I'm doing is I'm just wiggling the hand right to left as I'm putting the tool in on a horizontal cut to create the bead. Once the 3 beads are cut, I'll then take the parting tool again, the 3mm parting tool, and I'll make the grooves down. So now using the the spindle gouge, which has been ground with the swept back grind using the tool holder on the grinding jig, I've cut 2 half beads on each end, and we'll just take the parting tool and cut the dentils in between the beads that I've cut for the captive rings. So opening the cut up and going deeper than the depth of the ring, which is round to about 12mm, half an inch dowel, I'll open up each area between each bead so that we can then use the captive ring tool and release the beads. The areas between each bead are called dentils, which are like the turrets on a castle, and it gives us great access using the cat's claw or the bead forming tool to be able to release the beads. The 12th century Durham Cathedral oak, it's beautiful to turn. It has a lovely nut brown colour when it's finished, and using the finish that I use, which is a food safe finish, it really does pop the grain and show the grain. So now we're using the spindle gouge again, and this time bevel rubbing. I'm picking the cut up in the centre and creating an off-centre bead, and on the handle we'll create a bead similar to the bead on the other side, and then what we'll do using the spindle gouge again is create a cove. So back to the bead tools, and I'm just going to use the bead forming tool there, the captive ring tool, the cat's claw, and I'll go in from one side until I've cut just beyond the centre, and I do the same movement or the same tool use on each bead. If the tool needs to be sharpened, all I do is sharpen it using a diamond dagger, a little bit of lapping fluid and a diamond dagger, and then we can just sharpen the tool up. You could use a diamond credit card if you wish to do so as well. And again, do the same action on each bead so that you learn repetition, and then round from the upper side. You can see that I'm rolling round that curve on the claw, and we'll just release each bead. And finally the third bead. Care needs to be taken here because it's so easily to actually break the bead off. And then we're back to the parting tool just to clean any of the material off in between the beads. That one probably needs just a touch more with the beading tool or the captive ring tool just to release it. Again, we don't rush these because if you do, you can always run the risk of splitting the ring. So there we are, that's it released. And we can now go back to the spindle gouge and create a long cove. There's a half bead up near the handle, and then with the tool locked in my side, I'm just creating a long cove down to the centre of the captive ring area. Move the rings over to the right hand side so that we can use the tool on the left hand side, and take the material down to the desired diameter on the dowel. Another half bead there going into the head of the rattle, and then again continue from left through to the right to finish the actual cove itself with the captive rings. As you can see, the grain is really popped. There's some beautiful medullary rays there. So now, using the spindle gouge, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut the cove. So I've got the tool locked into the side of my body, and if you were to look at a clock face, the tool itself is rounded about the 10 o'clock position. Now it's at the 2, so I'm going from each side. I'm creating this shape which is similar to that of a tulip bulb. So there we are, 10 o'clock position, curving round, locked into the body, just to get the final curve in the cove. And then we'll take the parting tool and just put reference cuts there, because that's where we'll actually saw the pieces of material at a waist on each end into the drive centre and into the revolving tailstock centre. So now the sanding. We take the abrasives, and I've got the abrasives from 80 through to 400, and what I'll do with the abrasives is I'll actually speed up the process, and I'll take it through all the grits and sand the coves, and in between each grit what I will do is I'll take a soft brush and I'll just brush the grit down. So there we are, I'm just hand sanding the rings all the way around to finish them off, and it takes a little while, but I'll go through all the grits. I've got the Simon Hope sanding disc here, which has the 55mm recess, so it fits beautifully into the jaws of the chuck like that. And then all we'll do is sand up the top and bottom, not forgetting to put my air cap on to protect my lungs, and also to have my extractor going and my AS400. I've got the Camvac going, I've got the AS400, and I've also got my air cap on as well. At the very least I would wear a GSP mask, and so I'm protecting my lungs. I'm sanding each end of the baby rattle so that it's flat, so that you could stand the baby rattle on each end if you wish to do so. And I just hold it flat against the sanding disc and make sure that it is nice and flat. So the finish I'm going to use is this chestnut food safe. The reason for that is just in case the little one gets hold of it and puts it in its mouth, which I wouldn't leave the baby rattle there unattended because they might bite through the ring. It's nice. Really, it's made just to keep as a keepsake in the baby's box for when it was little, and it can pass on to its babies, we hope. And I would err on the side of caution leaving it on its own. But then again, if it does put it in its mouth, just by mistake, at least it's only got food safe oil on, and that's very, very safe. So I've got the food safe there ready, and I'm just going to take the little baby rattle, bit of kitchen paper to put it on with. It's perfectly safe. I don't need gloves for this, and actually it does condition the skin nice as well, because it's baby oil, really. It's mineral oil, and that's essentially what baby oil is. So a little bit onto the baby rattle. So just a nice coat of the chestnut food safe. Make sure you get it into all of the beads and coves and the little V cuts. A little bit more on there. Appears to pop the lid on because I have knocked it over before with my foot. So just pop the lid on there, and there's the handle, nice and clean. It's a bit like a tulip bulb handle, tulip bulb shape. Now make sure there's plenty on the rings. I'll let it dry for 24 hours before I package up and send it off to sunny Sheffield. The other rattle was destined for Roddy Mower in County Durham. There we are. It's just a nice little keepsake, 12th century Durham Cathedral oak. If it could speak, what a tale it would have to tell. There we are. That's it. I'll let it dry overnight before I package it up and send it off. There we go. And that's the Victorian baby rattle made. Lovely little project to do, and I like making these Victorian baby rattles. They're really nice presents to give to people. They're nice as an heirloom to pass on to the family, and I hope you enjoy your 12th century baby rattle. Okay. And thank you for watching. We shall see you sometime in the future, I hope. And take care, stay safe, stay well. Bye for now.